All right, so just a few things as we get started here. I went out to the Microsoft Developer Network. I believe I've told you about this on more than one occasion. msdn.microsoft.com. They've got a lot of really good information out there. If you'd care to take a look at it, I found this one, Accessing Data with ASP.NET, where they have an overview. They talk about the different data controls, how to bind, etc. And I mean, there's just a lot of stuff in here. All right. So again, that was under Accessing Data with ASP.NET. From there, I went to this ASP.NET Data Access Overview. So I've read through most of this stuff, and it goes through the different controls. Again, data binding, what a grid view is, what a data list is, etc. I thought that was pretty good. Then I went to this, using SQL Server Express with ASP.NET, and read through that. And they talked about the data source and all the other stuff that you have to do here. And I'm hoping that everybody's is going to work. We'll find out. And then finally, I found this. This was actually first was a version from 2010, but they have other versions, as you can see. So I chose the one for 2015, and it's create an SQL database using a designer. I didn't like this one as much, but point is there's plenty of documentation out there. All right. Okay, so I've got a question for you. And the question is, okay, I created a database for this, and I made 2 tables. All right. So I came in here and I said, drop database if exists BMI DB, BMI database. All right, create database BMI DB, use BMI DB, create table. All right, so get me started. Like I said, I had 2 tables. You may or may not agree with the way that I did it. So based on the information that you put into that BMI table, or you put into that BMI project, all right, you may or may not even agree with the fact that I had 2 tables, but what information do you see being put in there? Not all at once, though. You don't really. Do you understand the question? No. What I'm saying is, we're going to create right now the schema for the database. So I'm asking you. I told you when I did it, I added 2 tables. So I'm asking you what you think would go into those tables. Right. Okay. So I just call the first one just person. Call it whatever you want, it doesn't matter. All right. Well, even more fundamental than that, okay, we had, for everybody, you had 5 pieces of information. Would you agree? You had first name, you had the last name, you had the height, you had the weight, you had the gender. Would everybody agree with that? All right. The height and weight, I decided, if not, just another thing to show you, and I guess I thought I had this one open, but I guess that I, for some reason, closed it. I think that in many ways, you may or may not agree with this, but in many ways, programmers are easy to read, and also in many ways, they're lazy people. All right, and what I mean by that is if you look here, okay, if you look under some of these different things that we have, notice these are the different numeric types that you can use in here. Okay, the only one I'm going to go through is, first of all, that one wouldn't make a lot of sense because that only has the values, I believe, for a bit, that's very small value, so forget about that one. And tiny int, so here's the different sizes, all right? We wouldn't use a tiny int because, like, for example, that would work for the height, but it wouldn't work for the weight, all right? And a small int would be plenty big. No one's going to be taller than that. No one's going to weigh more than that. But when I say that by and large most programmers are lazy, I'd say that 99 times out of 100 they're going to choose int for these. And they're going to choose int because int is typically the type that you're going to use programmatically as well. All right. And the type that's up there, that 2 billion plus, I think that would correspond to a 32-bit int. So I'm just going to, the reason I'm telling you that is I just decided to make it an int for both of these. All right. And then the only thing that was left was gender. All right. And taking a look up on here, again, it would have been totally possible, all right, using this, and I made it an int, but I could have made it a tiny int. All right. So I did make it an int, and I'm just going to tell you, you might say, I don't understand. Why would you make that an int? We're going to go over it in just a minute. So that was the first table that I created. But the point on this is, I've got a friend who, this is not a joke either. He lives in Madison, Wisconsin. And I don't know if you know it or not, but per capita, Madison has got probably more people who are gay than most cities in America. Personally, I could care less, but he was telling me that he was filling out this form. He had never seen this before. Okay, they asked sexual, or they asked gender. There were 16 possibles. And it had almost everything you could think of. Someone who was in the middle of converting from one sex to the other, and all sorts of stuff. I decided that I thought it would be easiest to just say male, female, and other. Now again, you may not agree with that. You might say, well, what about I didn't want to go too nuts with it. And what I had there for data were just the people in this class, and I had no idea what your heights and weights are, so I guessed on stuff. So if I am wrong and if I offend anybody, I didn't mean to do it. All right? But I just wanted to show you that. So the other one that I created then, you've got the gender here, and it doesn't, what did I call the other one? Well, I kept it at gender, even though that's not probably really good. This one had just 2 fields in it. In fact, now that I think about it, what do I not have in this table? Yeah, probably should have come in and made an ID here. Just would have been a good idea. All right, we could have called it person ID. I mean, if you're that into that kind of stuff, it really wouldn't matter. We could do it like that. That'd be fine. All right, and then on this one, I guess it didn't spell very well, do I? Bless you. And then I called it just gender DESC for gender description. Okay, I made that an nvarchar. Again, male, female, and other, 10 would have been big enough, but you never know in the kind of world that we live in today. So I made it 25. So if somebody has some very big designation they decide later on that they want to make, they'd be able to do that. It's typically, you can always go back and alter a table after you've created it. All right, just so you know, you can always go back and alter a table. Sometimes, though, it can wreak havoc if you already have data in the table, especially if you make something smaller. All right, but I figured that 25 would be plenty big. All right, so let's see. I did this before class. I want to make sure I came up with the same thing. I forgot that there too. All right, yeah. All right, I'm gonna just grab this one first. So actually putting in the data, that's what I put in there. And I've got to change that to this. Now, when we actually start putting in the information, we won't do it exactly like this. You'll see it in just a minute, okay? And you'll notice that I started it, made it 1, 2, 3. Okay, everybody see that? I didn't make it 0, 1, 2. What we're going to work with in just a couple minutes is what's known as an identity column, which by default will start at 1. And really with auto increment that we used last year with MySQL, that typically also does start with 1, not with 0. All right, so even though we're used to starting with 0 at least sometimes, I guess it's not all the time. All right, let me fix this because I want to come back and give numbers to all of these. So just give me a second here too. I did everybody in the class, including me, and then I added a couple people. I added Charles, and I added Ryan, who's one of the other instructors, and I added Paul, who's one of the other instructors. So again, as I said, all kidding aside, if I was really off on your height, weight, or whatever, I sure would never try to do anything where I would tick anybody off. Although according to my wife talking to me this weekend, I don't really have to try. I have a natural gift that I'm able, especially she said with her, she said, you can just piss me off like no one I've ever seen. Didn't help that I asked if I got an award for that. I'm going to let you put that in because I had to. So if you don't like the height or weight I put for you, or if I spelled your name wrong, or I got your height wrong, you can change it to whatever you want. It really and truly doesn't matter. And this does say values here. There. I figured that would at least give us a way to get started. Can somebody tell me 2 things that are not shown in this database? What's the name of the database? BMI Database. What's one of the things not shown? The BMI. What's the other thing not shown? Once you've got your BMI, what do you get next? Status. Why aren't those shown? Why didn't I put those in there? I'm not going on until somebody gives me an answer.
Don't you have to have people members?
No, it has nothing to do with that. The answer, the guess was, don't you have to have people in there first? No, nothing to do with that. It's because by default, you don't put calculated values into a database. So if I was creating a database that was going to be for a payroll database, I would put in, for example, the number of hours you worked and the amount you get per hour, but I would not, by default, I would not put in what you made. I wouldn't do that. And I don't know about you, but I'm looking at these heights and weights, etc., that are up there, and any of them could change at any time. Would you agree with that?
Not really that high. Well, I guess.
No, probably not the height, but yeah. But again, if you were doing this for a medical place, and you had children in there, it could. All right. I never can figure out when people stop growing. It's different with different people. All right. And then you get to be my age, and it's not a joke, because the doctor had told me last year when I got my physical, he said it's almost time you're going to start shrinking. No, you do. When you get over 60, you start to shrink, and you'll typically go down anywhere like up to 2 inches. Now, when we create this database, it's going to be actually done a little bit differently than this, but you'll see what I mean in just a couple minutes. And if anybody wants to make themselves a 3, you know, they can do that too. Again, if you don't have your project open, the one that you've been working on, please open that up, because we're going to create the database right in there. Am I missing something? I didn't put a no. First name, last name. First name, last name, height. Wait, this is in the wrong place, isn't it? See that? So the easiest way to fix that would just be to move the gender up here. Sorry about that. There's the ID, first name. What happened to the last? Oh, put it in the right place though. First name, last name, gender, height, weight. All right, so I got first name, last name. I never put gender here. Somebody has to call me out when I make mistakes like that. To my knowledge, SQL Server is another one of these relational database management systems that is not case sensitive. That said, if you are ever working in a database situation like this, you should either follow the norm or ask or come up with your own construct. Notice I've got everything in lowercase except for the first letter of the first name or last name. To me, that makes sense. Sometimes you'll see it where people put everything in uppercase, which is also fine. But if you're going to do that, make sure that you're consistent with the way that you do it. All right? It'll still work even if it's mixed case, but if you run reports and stuff and you don't remember to make everything uppercase or whatever case, it'll look very unprofessional. All right? Another thing, and you may care about this, you may not, but you know, back in the 80s and even going into the 90s, the biggest problem that you had with databases was this. And what I mean by that is what people ended up doing was they put in something like this. And if they had done all of them like that, it wouldn't be a problem, okay? But sometimes they put in the last name and then the first name, etc., and there was no consistency. There were people that I knew who made a living by taking data that was in like this and turning it into this. Do you understand what I'm saying? They took one field and turned it into two, and you might say, what's the big deal? Well, when management came in and they wanted something that was, they wanted a report based on last name, it's much harder to do it when it's one field than it is to do it when it's two fields. All right. So everybody has your ASP.NET project up, correct? A couple people are still finishing up, that's fine. And I'm having you do this just so you have that information. When we put it in, again, it's going to be done a little bit differently. You're going to see that in just a minute. Everybody done? That was a no. Was that a no? Okay. We're going to start on this today. I don't know how far we'll get. Then I want to talk about what we're going to do next, but my hope is, I think I hit that. Maybe I did. My hope is that Thursday and Friday of this week we can start taking a look at the information for the St. Charles County Economic Development Center. Okay. Everybody else done? Dominic, you done? Okay. All right. So, coming up to our project here, then what I'd like you to do, and it's going to look a little weird, there's different ways of doing this. I will tell you that even though I've read some of this stuff, I've taught myself a lot of this, and the reason I'm mentioning that to you is sometimes maybe the way that I'm showing you isn't the best way of doing it, okay? And if that's the truth, if that's the case, sorry about that. All right, now I gotta remember what I wanted to show you to do next, though. And, okay. So let's right mouse click on the name of our project, which mine is Body Mass Index. All right, not the name of your solution, but the name of your project. Right mouse click on it and choose Add. You've done this before. And choose New Item. All right. Now, if you take a look at your screen right now, probably where you are right here is you're on web, and that's where we've always been. But we want to move over here to data because we want to be able to add an SQL Server Database. Does that make sense? So make sure over here you choose data under here, and you should see for your, I don't know, fifth or sixth one down, SQL Database. And if you don't, raise your hand because I want to make sure we're all at the same place. All right. Now I just called mine, as I showed you, BMI DB, but it doesn't really matter that much what you call it. DB is kind of an accepted abbreviation for database. Okay. Now, watch when I do this. It comes up and it says, hey, you're attempting to do this. You really should have a folder over here that's called app data and put it in there. All right. And I purposely didn't do that because I'm going to say, it says, do you want me to make one for you? And I'm going to say yes. You could have done it yourselves as well, just so you know. We could have right mouse clicked first on the project, chosen add new ASP.NET folder, and chosen app data. And then when we did this, we wouldn't have gotten this message. All right. It's not a big thing one way or the other, but I just wanted to show it to you. So I'm going to say, do you want to place it in there? I'm going to say yes. And it should add another folder here very shortly. All right, there it is. Okay. Now, the other thing, this is on mine. This may not happen on yours. What you'll want to do, if you have your toolbox up, you'll want to click View and you'll want to choose Server Explorer, please. Okay? I'm being as deliberate as I can with this. And again, as we do this stuff, one or more of you might find another way to do it that you think is a better way. Then go ahead and do it that way. All right? But after you're up and you bring up your Server Explorer, mine at least has got a little check here, little X. Yours may not. But I have found that when I get that little thing there, I just right mouse click on it and tell it to refresh, and then it goes away. All right? Which is just basically saying refresh the schema, which says to me that somehow, even though we don't have the schema in yet, something's out of whack. And by telling it to refresh, it puts it back in whack. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way that I look at it. All right? So, if you take your mouse and you click on your database file here, okay, you can see what's in there. So we're going to create the two tables in just a minute. All right? Now, if we wanted to, let's say there was some kind of a query that we were running all the time, we could also come in and create views. All right? I'd like it if we got to the point where we could at least do some simple stored procedures. All right? I don't know if we'll get there or not. Okay? So we'll see. But under tables, I'm going to click here. You know, notice there's nothing there. There's nothing here. There's nothing here. You don't have to do that, but just to show you. None of these have anything in them, which really and truly, other than the assemblies, should make sense to you because we haven't put anything in yet. We just created a brand new database. All right? So I'm going to right mouse click on the folder that says tables, and I'm going to click add new table. All right? Now it says loading, the design service is loading. Yours might load faster than mine. It's no big thing one way or the other. You should have this. All right. Sooner or later they should come up. Even if your machine is slow to load, this should come up. All right. And I want to show you something because it's a little bit confusing. And that is that when you're doing the stuff in here, okay, I'm going to move this up. You don't have to do this, but I just want to show it to you. I'm going to create everything in here. All right. But what you're going to see is you could also create it in here if you wanted to do that. Everybody hear that? I just want to make sure you know that. Okay? And you'll see that by default, it gives you a field. And actually, Microsoft does suggest that you call your primary key field that's an ID, you just call it ID. All right? So I'm just going to leave it like that, even though we called it, you know, person ID or whatever on the other one. We'll just leave it at that, okay? Now, the first thing that I want to do is I want to click on this ID field, and then I want to look over in my properties window, okay? I'd like all of you to do that, please. So click on your ID field. You don't have to double click or anything. Just click on it, and then bring up your properties window. You might have to drag it up a little bit, or else you're going to have to drag it down. This is the one I want you to see here where it says identity specification, all right? Do you remember that when we were using MySQL last semester, we would say auto increment? Everybody remember that? And it would start with 1 and keep going. This is the equivalent of auto increment. So if I click where it says identity specification and I click on the plus sign, and right now you'll notice under is identity it says false. We want it to say true. So you have to either double click or click the down arrow. Then notice it says I'm going to start with 1 and I'm going to go up by 1 every time. Okay? So we don't have to do that. Not only don't we have to do that, don't go in and manually put the number in yourselves. When we start to put in the data, it'll look like the number's not there. But then when we get done with the row, the number will be there. Does that all make sense? All right. And you'll notice that once we put all that stuff in, it doesn't look different here, but it did put identity right there. All right. If for some reason, and I probably have told you this kind of thing before. I remember years ago going to when I first moved to Rockton, Illinois. I wanted to pay for my gas, and I wanted to use a check because I didn't have any money with me. And it said there they would only take checks that started with 500. All right, maybe you've seen that kind of thing before. Well, I was too stupid that I didn't have to start my checks with 500. All right, but the point is, if I wanted to do something like that, I could set the seed to 500 right there. So the first one would be 500. All right, so if we wanted to do that, and if for some reason we wanted to increment by more than 1, we could do that. If for some reason we wanted everyone to have an even number, we could put 2 in there as an example. Start it with 2 and have it go up by 2. We don't care about that, but I just wanted you to see that stuff. All right? All right. So looking at what we just had there, you know, and we can go back and forth if we need to. But if you look, what did we have here? Well, this is the equivalent of our person ID. All right? So we're going to have first name, we're going to have last name, gender, height, and weight. All right? So I'm going to come down to the next field here and click in there, and I'm going to put in first name. And typically when people do this, they use camel case like I'm using right now. All right? It's not that it's mandatory. It's just kind of an unwritten rule that that's what most people do. All right? And I'm going to click in where it says data type, and you'll notice it's got the nchar. It's got the same stuff we looked at before. If there's an nvarchar. Okay, so I'm going to go there, and I'm going to manually come in there then and change it to 25. All right. We don't want to allow anything in our database to be null. You'll notice as we put in columns, they default to allow nulls. All right. If we had a middle initial field here, we might allow those to be null. But we're gonna require that everybody has an ID, a first name, a last name, a height, a weight, and a gender. Okay. So I'm going to click where that is right here. I'm just going to do that. Then come down to the next line, and I'm going to put in last name. Again, make that an nvarchar. And you don't have to even click the down arrow like I did. Notice if I type in NV, how it changes it. Did you see that? All right, so there's a few, I don't know if you'd call them shortcuts or not, but kind of. All right, because of the way that I put it in here, I think we had gender next. Yep. And then height, and then weight. Nope, I don't want that allowed now there. All right, we're just about done, but just a couple more things, just so you see this. Again, you'll notice that down below, everything that we've been putting in is being built down here too. And just while I was teaching myself this, I would sometimes change them here and sometimes change them there just to see if it mattered. And it didn't appear to. Okay? All right. Let's see. I didn't. Okay. I'll have to go get the card. But hopefully as you take a look at this, the stuff that's in here makes sense to you as far as what we're doing. All right? And you might even say, you know what, right now, why do we even have a gender in there? Well, later on, there actually are different scales for men and women. So maybe we would want to expand it at another time. That's why I put it in. All right? We probably won't, but just in case we did want to. All right. Let's see. Okay, and I click the X. It's like, what are you doing that for? You want to get out? Do I want to save the changes? Yes. All right. So now notice it's asking me where I want to save this. This gets to be a little funky. All right. I'm hoping that this works, what I'm about to show you. So I'm going to literally go through and do all this because look where it's trying to save it, to my documents file. That doesn't make any sense to me. All right. But when I've done this in the past, what I'm going to show you now has worked. So I'm going to see if it does or not. All right. Mine is on my F drive. Yours may be someplace else, but mine is body mass index V2. All right, and it's there. And it's app data. Okay, that's where I want to save it. Well, notice the name that it gives you by default, dbo.table.sql. All right, well, I wanted to call that person. All right, so I'm going to click save. like the way it's looking right now. So I would have thought it was going to be saved right there, and it doesn't look like it did. And the table.
Is it the first binary index or the second one that you opened?
Pardon me?
You saved in the first or the second binary index? Is this one?
I should have saved it in the second. Is this the first that I opened?
I don't know. It just says
I
the
don't know
first.
either.
That's why I was just asking.
I don't know either. Okay. I'm just going to close mine and open it again. Sure. I'll tell you what, we're at 135. Let's take a break. Let's come back at 150, and I'll be plugged in by then. And we'll just continue on from there.